In this video, we're going to show you how to perform a little bit of routine maintenance on your Redline N7 and also how to do a nozzle swap. So the first thing you're going to need is a nice clean work surface. Put some paper towels down. You don't want to be putting dirty, greasy parts on somewhere where they're going to pick dirt up. Also, you're going to need a few tools, small flat blade screwdriver, a 3/8 or 10mm nut driver or small socket set, and a small pair of needle nose pliers. Also some Tech T grease and a few Q-tips would be good too for cleaning. So the first thing to take your N7 apart, you're going to need to remove this front fitting. Take your small flat blade screwdriver, unscrew this front fitting. When you take this fitting off, you're going to see there's a little O-ring here. You want to make sure you don't lose that O-ring. If you lose that O-ring, your nozzle probably will not cycle properly because you'll have an air leak here. So then once the fitting's off, you can just unscrew the red front from the main body of the engine. We'll set that aside for now. Inside, you'll see a brass nut and the tip of the spool. So you're going to need to take those out. You take your 3/8 nut driver, loosen that brass nut, take your needle nose, grab the spool by the tip, pull it out. That's it. There's no other parts inside the engine itself. There's just a bore where the spool goes and the air chamber. You can take some Q-tips, clean any old dirt and grease out of that spool bore, clean any dirt and old grease out of the chamber area. Make sure you don't leave any Q-tip fuzz down inside there. Clean that all out. Then you're going to want to take a clean paper towel, wipe off any old grease and dirt that may be on the spool. These two black O-rings are the spool O-rings. This front O-ring is the poppet O-ring. So you're going to want to re-lube all these O-rings. You don't need a ton of grease. Just lube them up. Use the grease that's still on your fingers to lube that front poppet O-ring. And just push that spool back inside the bore. Take the nut, set that over the end of the spool, and tighten that back down. Tighten that nice and snug. Don't crank on it, but you want it nice and snug. Now if you're going to just do some cleaning and lubing, you would just pull this or pop the nozzle out. You'd clean the old grease off the nozzle, re-lube everything, put it back together. We're actually going to swap nozzles here, so I'll set that one aside. Take your, first we would clean any old dirt and grease out of the inside of the front. There's an O-ring in here that seals the front of the nozzle. Put a little lube on that guy. Take and lube your outer O-ring on the nozzle. There's an inner O-ring, a little grease on the inner O-ring. Again, don't need a ton, just lube everything up nicely. And then just slide the new nozzle back into the front, push the O-ring through. There you go. This is what we call the cup. This O-ring, this big one, doesn't actually seal anything. It just provides some crush on the cup to keep everything lined up properly. The same thing, this O-ring does not actually provide an air seal. It's just a bumper on the for when the nozzle comes back. So now to put the front back together, put the cup into the inside of the nozzle, take this O-ring, slide it around, make sure it's in the little notch that's in the cup, even all the way around. Thread the front back on. up so the hole lines up for the hose. Screw that fitting back in. As you go to tighten this fitting, it's going to want to rotate. Put your thumb or finger there and hold it so that it's lined up even. If this is too far off and it's not aligned properly, it won't fit back in the gearbox correctly. That's pretty much it for maintenance and swapping out a nozzle. It's a very simple engine. There's not a lot of parts inside. Very easy to maintain. You should not have to do this, but maybe once or twice a year, just to keep everything cleaned and operating correctly. A couple areas to point out. This hole right here, this is just a plug. Don't take that out. All that does is seal a cross drill. It should not leak out of there. If for some reason it does leak out of there, just try putting a little drip of green Loctite on there, let it sit for half an hour, 45 minutes. That should seal it back up. Same thing with this here. That's just, again, a plug for a cross drill. Same thing, should not leak out of there. If it does, a little green Loctite, let it sit for a while, should take care of it. If you pull those plugs out, you're probably going to cause a leak. You're going to break the factory seal. This hole here, behind this fitting, is the exhaust for the nozzle as the nozzle moves back and forth. This hole, air will come out of that hole when the gun is cycling. There should be no air leaking out of here or coming out of here when the engine is aired up, but the engine is not cycling. If you do have a leak coming out of here, it's going to be one of those two black O-rings on the nozzle or on the spool, or the outer O-ring on the nozzle, this O-ring here. If this O-ring is leaking, air can back up through this hose and leak out of here, or it'll leak from the spool. If you do get a leak out of here, first thing you're going to want to do is do just what we showed you. Take it all apart, clean everything, lube everything. More than likely you just got a little bit of dirt on an O-ring, and that'll take care of it. That does not fix it. You might want to change out those two black O-rings on the spool and this outer O-ring on the nozzle, and that should take care of it. Same thing here. This hole is also an exhaust hole for this solenoid. Air will come out of this when the engine is cycling. Air should not be coming out of here any other time. If you're getting air coming out of here with the engine aired up but the engine not cycling, it's going to be either dirt in the actual solenoid or dirt or something on one of these O-rings. If you do have a leak out of there, pull the solenoid out, clean everything, clean the bore out, try lubing these O-rings back up a little bit and putting it back together. That should take care of your leak. If that does not fix your leak, you're going to want to try to blow some air in all these holes. There may be a little bit of dirt in the actual solenoid itself. Blow some air through here, that should take care of it. This end here in the middle is the spool for the solenoid. You can push it in. You just push gently with your little screwdriver and open that solenoid up, and while you're pushing in, again, blow air through those holes, and that should take out any dirt that's in there. Be careful when you do that. You may dislodge these O-rings. Make sure the O-rings go back in their little grooves. When you go to put this solenoid back in, a very light amount of grease on these O-rings. You don't want big gobs, just a very light amount, so that when you screw this solenoid back in, it doesn't, none of the O-rings hang in the bore, and it goes nice together smoothly. Otherwise you'll roll an O-ring off and cause a leak. When you tighten the solenoid back down, it only needs to be finger tight. You don't need to get on there with a wrench and crank on it. If you do, you'll actually can make the solenoid come out of alignment and cause a leak. So just finger tight is all it needs to be. And that's it. That should take care of your Redline N7 for any routine maintenance and a nozzle swap.